All right, we're going. So I know I don't need to share this information, but no, number one, I am not a YouTuber. I don't have the proper equipment to be doing this, especially if I were to get serious about this. I'll tell you why I'm doing this video. I feel very strongly that I've needed to put this out there, but I've actually recorded this segment already. And I didn't like the audio. And knowing that I don't have the proper equipment to do this, I knew that it would be, that it wouldn't be the highest quality. But lo and behold, I found there's a microphone that hooks into the computer in one of my cupboards, and so I don't know where it came from. My son's a musician, and so it must have been in some audio equipment that he had. I don't know, but we're going to give this a shot. I tested it. Sounds better than the one I did yesterday. This very segment. So we'll do this again, and hopefully it works better. I want to give you the best quality that I can with the equipment that I have. So, all right, well, let's get started. Again, without being an experienced YouTuber and video uploader, I expect for this to be a little bit clunky, but also I just learned a really cool feature on how to share a screen when I'm live streaming. So I know there's very basic stuff for many of you out there, but this was new to me and super exciting actually, because there's a couple things that I'm going to want to share. Maybe not in this segment, but in another segment. I've ran through my notes, different talking points that I want to cover, and it is a lengthy thing. So I ask you to just bear with me. I am going to break this into a couple different parts so that it's not just one giant video. So I want to just put a disclaimer out there. I marked this one, and again, I don't understand all the algorithms and how things work with YouTube completely. So I'm a bit dumb in that space, but I did set this as not for kids. I may say a few things. I've been known to throw a few cuss words out here and there, but more than that, I'm going to be talking about some things that may not be appropriate for kids. And so I would just say, yeah, listen and watch and decide for yourself if you feel like sharing this with children. I'm going to be probably saying some things that to people that are active and believe in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, LDS Church. I'm going to be referring it to the Mormon Church, and I'll go into why more. I don't think that is, the current prophet has declared that is a win for Satan if you call it the Mormon Church or use the word Mormon. But you've got two prophets before him and numerous prophets even before them which is the leader of the church that have been just completely fine with it, and in fact spent millions of dollars on a campaign to identify us as Mormons. And so I'm absolutely not under the belief that Mormon is a bad thing as far as using that word versus the full name of the church. So that's where I'm at. And so I'll be using that. But there's some things, I don't know necessarily too many things in this segment that true believing Mormons will feel are super offensive. But I'm gonna basically explain to you why the things that I found in the church that ultimately led me to want to walk away and ultimately to walk away from the church. And they were really hard for me to discover, not in that they were hard to find because there's plenty of resources out there with the internet and different, I'll actually be walking you through some of the sources that I've used, but more emotionally, they're hard things to take in because you build your whole life and identity around being a Mormon or sorry, a member of the Mormon Church, and it kind of shapes who you are. And then to find out some of the things, at least that I found out, it was very difficult, uh, and so there's going to be some of that, and whether it hits you the same as it hit me, who knows, but just know that. Uh, my intentions, I want to state those to start here. My intentions are not to pull anybody away from the church. My intentions are to give a place where if people are going through what's called a faith crisis, these are terms I didn't know 2 years ago, but struggling with their faith, their identity, in that you've been part of the Mormon church for all your life, and now all of a sudden you're finding things out that you didn't know. Maybe you felt that they were hidden from you. Maybe you just never knew, and now that you find out, it starts to make you question things to where um, it hits deep, deep, deep in the core of who you are, and it's so hard to process. Faith crisis. A faith crisis is just crazy thing to navigate. Um, and then the other purpose that I want here is, if especially those that are closest to me, that know Kimberly, find out, they when they hear that we've left the church, the general term that's used in the church is they've fallen away. That term alone kind of gets under my skin, because it wasn't just a lack of praying or reading the scriptures, or carrying out family home evening, or a lack of studying every week and come follow me. It wasn't like falling away. The word falling feels very accidental, and it's not. This isn't a situation where we just kind of slipped away slowly. This is a situation where we learned things, and I'm going to walk you through them. Some of the bigger items that we learned, and we chose to walk away. It was not an accident. We, after a lot of consideration, decided this isn't for us. And so, um, anybody that's especially close to us, that may know that we left the church, that they might watch this and understand why. And our realities are based on the stories that we tell ourselves, or the things that we accept as facts. So you might tell yourself that Kimberly and Jason are a term that the leaders of the church have called lazy learners, um, apostates. There's a lot of terms that the church gives to people like myself and my wife, Kimberly, but when in fact that it's more, we were interested in finding out facts, and then what we did with those facts, it was a very conscious decision. I'm not going to belabor that much more, but we didn't fall away, we walked away. And that's important. I like that terminology. It feels right. And then also, some people might say this is a term that ex-Mos is a term that we'll talk a little bit about, ex-Mormons, uh, that ex-Mos can leave the church, but they can't leave the church alone. Um, some of the things that I've found are so offensive to me and so damaging, that I actually think that the church is harmful to exist. And I'm gonna explain why I mean that, but I'm not planning to spend a lot of my time and energy trying to attack the church or break down the church. When I see something come across the news, I'll probably post something on social media about it and express my opinion. And I've been doing that over the course of this last year. It's been interesting to watch the responses to that. And I'm not trying to start a debate. I'm not trying to be negative, but some of the things that we've discovered are just outright disgusting. And I feel like when you know that stuff exists that's hidden, it's something that you want to fight to make sure that it doesn't happen anymore. That there are no more victims. That the church would stop protecting, in a way, people that have harmed children in particular, but doesn't just have to be children. So we'll get into that. So today, or this session, I plan to share some information about my childhood, just a little bit, but it helps give some context to my position in the church, my beliefs in the church. And then I'm just noticing on this video, my head's really shiny, but all right, sorry. I am a tangent guy. So, so we'll go over some childhood stuff, some teenager stuff, seminary, some experiences in seminary, different things that I've been through leading up to. Let's see. We'll probably cut it off after talking about marriage, building families, and some church service, and then we'll probably start a second segment, but don't hold me to that. So by the time I graduated high school, I had moved 18 times. And, a lot of people think, oh, military? No, it wasn't military. My dad has been married a few times, and each one of those seemed to come with a few moves. My parents were actually divorced, though, and I tried to do some math and figure out when I first moved to a new school in third grade. So then that's when my dad had married a woman, and we moved in with her, which would be my first stepmother, my dad's second wife. And after they had divorced, I believe I was around 6 years old when my mother and my father divorced. And so we'd moved. I was baptized a few months after I turned 8 years old. And at that time, that woman was active in the church. And so kind of by default, we became more active in the church, and I was baptized at 8. And most of my childhood, I didn't spend, it was kind of in and out of the church. Like before that, it was very much in and out of the church, probably more out than in. And what's interesting looking back on that is when I got baptized at 8 years old, thinking back, now I don't know what frame of mind I was in, but I think because I wasn't really active in the church before that, at least that I remember, I think I can confidently say that I was baptized as a formality. That's just something that 8-year-olds do in the Mormon church. That I had no clue whatsoever what I was doing, but I don't necessarily look back and regret that decision or hold anybody accountable for the fact that I was baptized at 8 years old. It's just interesting to think back. And when I hit as they call the age of accountability and got baptized at that age, I was barely going to church. Like I barely was starting to go to church. But it's what everyone was doing. So I think that's what happened. I don't know. It doesn't really matter at this point, but just kind of interesting. When I was 9 years old, though, in June of 1990, my mom was very intoxicated and was driving and got in a severe car accident, very horrific car accident, and passed away. And luckily, she didn't take anybody with her, as far as she didn't injure anybody else that I'm aware of. But she did lose her life. And that was, I mean, obviously very devastating for me to lose my mother at such a young age. She was only 30 years old when she passed away. And, ever since then, I look back and I remember many times during my years growing up, and I would be with my friends, at their house, and they had a mom, and I always thought, oh, that's so strange, like to have a mom, and it sucks. It sucks to have to think that. Like I don't have to think that, but I did think that, and that's awful to just be that, I guess, thrown off by the fact that somebody's got a mom. Now, I don't want to discredit any of the stepmothers that I've had through my growing up years, especially this one that was my stepmom at the time that my mother passed away. And I don't know if it's because of the trauma that I went through at that time, but she's always stuck as a mother figure, even after her and my dad got divorced a few years later, some years later. I can't remember how long. It doesn't really matter to me, but she's always, to this day, actually stayed in my life as kind of a mother figure. And her kids, I've always considered to be siblings, even though legally or and on paper, if you will, are not siblings of mine. And I love them all very much as if they were still my own family. And so it's just interesting where life takes you, right? Let's fast forward a little bit. My junior year, in my junior year, I went to three different high schools. And the first high school that I went to in my junior year, we lived in a home that we were renting, and I went to seminary for the first time. Now, seminary is like church. It's like Sunday school, or you're learning, you're reading the scriptures, you're learning different things about the gospel, about Christ, God, and whatnot. Now, a lot of places in the world, seminary is offered through the church, but it's like an early morning thing, like stupid early in the morning. And I say that because I'm not a morning person. But you'd go to seminary very early in the morning, and then you would, when you get done with seminary at that point, like you would go to school or whatever it is in your day that you're going to. In Utah, though, and maybe some other places where the church is pretty strong, pretty prominent, but in Utah, you are able to take seminary as like part of your schedule during the day in high school. And everywhere that I was at, and I think this is probably the case everywhere that offers it like this, if you were to miss like a day in seminary or a class period, it wouldn't count towards your attendance, which would affect possibly like your ability to graduate high school and things. And so it was an elective, but it didn't count toward graduation, I think. I don't remember. Now, seminary they do have like a 2-year diploma and a 4-year diploma for seminary. And I don't know if it's like a diploma or if it's a certificate. I don't remember. But this was my first experience in my junior year of going to seminary, and it was super cool. This first high school I went to that year, the teacher was Brother Parker, and Brother Parker was just fantastic. He was very inspiring, and I was just really impressed with seminary. I was like, this is really cool. And then we moved to another school, and at that other school, the reason we moved there, if you care to know, the house we were renting got sold. The landlord came to us and just said, hey, I just sold the house. You've got 30 days to leave. So we were only at that first high school for one of the 4 quarters of that school year. And then we moved to another house, started at another high school in the beginning of the second quarter. And I was there for the second and third quarter of that year. And in that one, I ended up getting voted in as seminary class president, and I thought that was pretty cool. Again, I was really eating it up. I was loving church, and it was cool. I felt great, um, and so then that marriage came to an end, and my father and I moved back to an area where I did a lot of my growing up. The good thing about that is I had a core group of friends that I was able to go back to, and I didn't have to make a complete new set of friends. I think that's what was really devastating for me. Out of all the moves that we did, a lot of them were kind of close in the same area ish. And so it was nice because a lot of those I was able to keep some of the friends, and like seventh grade through 10th grade was all in the same area. And then the last part of my 11th grade year was back in that same area. So as far as like being a teenager, I had a core group of friends in that area. The first two high schools on my junior year were super rough because I had to make completely new friends. And it's just, when you're 16, 17 years old, friends are like your world. And so it's tough to have to start over. But, we made it through. I think it's shaped me in a way to be a little bit more social and be able to get along with people and get to know people a little bit better. Maybe because I was forced in that situation. I don't know. I'm very much a take experiences that you've had and like what can you learn from that experience. I'm not so much a believer that we're put in experiences on purpose so that we can have a trial and learn from it, but I do like to try to take some accountability and learn from whenever I'm able to from tough things. My senior year, though, was interesting. I still took seminary. Now, at this point, now when we left that house, when we left that marriage, um, and when I say we, like my dad and her split, divorced, whatever you want to call it. At that point, my dad and I once again went inactive, and so for the rest of my junior year, and then leading into my senior year, my dad had to move up to northern Utah, about an hour and a half to 2 hours away, for some work opportunities. And he asked, "Hey, do you want to come with me, or do you want to figure something else out?" I opted to check in with my grandparents, see if I could move in with them and stay at that school, and that's what I ended up doing. Uh, so senior year, I decided to go to seminary again, and now I figured out the life hack that you schedule seminary either first period or last period of the day. And if you don't feel like getting up out of bed in a timely manner, then you skip seminary and just go to your second period. Or if you want to leave school early and you have seminary as your last class, then you ditch out early and it doesn't count against you. And I did that a lot, to the point that my teacher, Brother Ashcroft, he comes to me and says, "Hey, Jason, I'm concerned about your attendance in seminary." And now, mind you, I'm a 17, 18-year-old, bullheaded, I know everything kid. And he goes, "In order for you to graduate seminary with even a 2-year certificate or diploma, I need you to finish this packet." And this packet was like pretty thick, 2, 3 inches thick. And I was kind of rude, I think. I mean, I remember looking at him and being like, "Dude, like, I'm super not interested. The reason I have seminary is so that I have more options as to when I come to school." And so Ashcroft was great with me. I played basketball with him a lot in the church, and he kind of looked at me, I think, maybe as a project. And bless his heart, I wasn't interested at all, but he was a good guy. He tried, but it's interesting. Uh, as you're in the church, You believe that you've got 100% of the truth, the true gospel, the one true gospel, that every other church, well, maybe not be a bad thing, but it doesn't have the complete truth. And that's what you believe. And you believe that that is only through this church that you can be get to the highest degree of glory in heaven. There's a lot of interesting, nuanced beliefs in the church that kind of make it, the way they've built it up. It kind of makes it to where you have got to be a faithful member of this church, or your host. And so, with that, you believe that you've got all the truth. You believe that you are truly happy, and so you want to spread that joy and those possibilities to those around you. And that's why members of the church are so insensitive to your lack of interest. They are very aggressive in trying to get you to come to church. You'll notice the missionaries are very aggressive at getting you to listen to their discussions. I'm not saying that this is a good excuse for them to be so aggressive, but it is why, because they believe they have something so valuable that they want you to have it as well. So, but it's tough. That's tough to deal with. Also, in my senior year, and this is pretty pivotal to set up the next phase of life, is I had a girlfriend and we got very serious and actually became sexually active. And so that in the Mormon church is a sin next to murder. If you look at the handbook at the punishments for sexual activity outside of wedlock, outside of marriage, it is the consequences of which are next to if you were to murder somebody. So, like, it's a serious deal. Sexual sin is a serious deal. So, and that's that I don't know. I'll explain why that impacted me so much, because at the time I'm like, hey, this is part of development, and we're young, but it wasn't a big deal to me, and I felt guilty because I had been active in the church before this, and I felt kind of a shade of guilt. But then I'm like, you know what? I don't really believe this stuff, so why am I letting it make me feel guilty? It was interesting. Well, I lived with my grandparents though, and I lived with them up until I got married. My grandpa, again, his intentions, I think, were pure. He was a military man. He served in the Korean War, and he was just very, very straightforward. If he had something to say, he'd say it. And every Sunday morning, he would call downstairs to wake me up and say, hey, get ready to go to church. Church starts in 30 minutes, or church starts in an hour, whatever. And then of course, I'd just go back to sleep because I wasn't interested. And then after church, he'd come home every Sunday and tell me, man, you really missed out. I hear brother so-and-so gave this talk, and it was so inspiring. And basically he would just go on and on and on. I'm like, Grandpa, stop. I'm really not interested. And, it was kind of a guilt trip in a way. And again, it's a boundary thing. It's a lack of sensitivity to the fact that you're not, well, I guess I was going to say, you're not selling what you're trying to sell. It's almost like trying to convince somebody to switch political parties, for example. If you're not open to that message, then it's a futile effort. And that's how trying to convince somebody to come to church can be. Now, apparently my grandpa was better than what I'm describing right now, because I ended up deciding, you know what, it is going to be easier for me to go to church and deal with whatever happens there than to sit here and listen to him every Sunday. And so I ended up going to church, and I ended up thinking, well, that's not so bad. And so I'd go a little bit more often. I didn't go all the time, but then I'd go more often, more and more often. And over time, I start to become more active in the church. I had gone on a river trip with the young men. My grandpa went with us, and it was a great time. And, at the same time, my grandpa's also, now that I'm looking back, I think he was trying to get me out of the house. Because he wanted me to go into the military, and he was trying to encourage me to look into the different branches of the military. There were a lot of like sign-on bonuses and things like that, along with the education, the GI Bill, and things like that, where you can get a lot of your education paid for after. It's probably after and during serving. I don't know how it works. So yeah, there was some really cool things about the military that I got interested in, and I checked out the different branches, and I was ready. I had chosen the path of trying to become an airborne medic in the Army. Now, in my senior year of high school, I had gotten through an EMT course and become an EMT, and then after high school, got hired on with an ambulance company. So I was actually working as an EMT. So this was an area of interest to me, and so I'm thinking military and really leaning toward going, and in fact scheduled the day that I was going to go sign. And then um, and then also at the same time, I've got people trying to get me to consider a mission. So the bishop was asking me about it. Some of my partners on the ambulance were asking me, kind of saying, "Hey, this is a perfect opportunity to kind of push pause on life, go on a mission." And there was a lot of pressure there too. And so I was really balancing the two. The night before I was going to sign with the military, I thought, you know what, let's go ahead and pray about it. And so I did, and I felt like I should go on a mission. So cancel the military plans for now, and let's go talk to the bishop. So go talk to the bishop, and for kind of like a worthiness interview type thing. All right, Bish, I'm ready to go on a mission. I want to go on a mission. I prayed about it, feel great about it. Let's do it. And he says, okay. And so we start getting into past sins, like a confessional, right? And so I just start unloading my past on the bishop. And he goes, okay, okay. Have you ever read the Book of Mormon? I said, no, I've never read the Book of Mormon cover to cover. No, of course not. Do you believe it's true? And I'm like, yeah, I think it's true. And he goes, well, you need to gain a testimony of the Book of Mormon. You need to stop any of this sexual activity, and you need to wait a year to go through the temple. We got to basically fix your past and get you to go, get you worthy to go to the temple. And then the shame parade starts, and I call it the shame parade. One of the things that they do to punish you for sins that you commit sometimes in the church is that they tell you not to take the sacrament for so many weeks. And the sacrament is the bread and water that represents the body and blood of Jesus. And you take that every week. And when you take that, it's basically renewing the promises that you made at baptism. So let's go there. In baptism, it's believed that you wash away your sins, and when you rise up out of the water, it's symbolic of being reborn. So you're reborn perfect, no sins, and of course you sin, according to the church, like according to probably most Christians, that we're all natural sinners. The first time you say something mean to somebody, then that's a sin. So, so you're not perfect for long, but that's then the purpose of the sacrament. That when you take the sacrament, you're renewing those vows or those covenants that you're going to do your best to be as much like Christ as possible. And so that's the purpose of the sacrament. And it's never actually, it's always bugged me since this point of being told to skip the sacrament. I'm one that needs to know why. And to me, and I might understand this wrong, but a lot of people talk about the church as it's like a hospital, and our spirits need healing, and therefore you're not supposed to be perfect to go to church, because people that aren't sick don't go to the hospital, right? So we're sick, we go to the hospital for care. Our spirits are not perfect, they're sick in a way, I guess, in this in this way. Then we go to church to make our spirits better, to make our souls, or whatever you want to call it, better. And to me, I always thought of the sacrament as the medicine. So, if you're sick and you go to the hospital and they say, yes, come to the hospital, because that's where you go when you're sick. However, you can't take the medicine for 5 weeks. And then when your sickness is kind of gone, then you can start taking the medicine again. And that's the way I've seen it. And it's just so weird that they would do that. And then, when you don't take the sacrament, people see that, and people, especially, and I don't want to just single out the Mormon church here, but people gossip. And so if you see somebody not take the sacrament, what happens? I think naturally in your mind, you're going, Jason didn't take the sacrament. So then what's the story you tell yourself? What's the narrative that you create in your own mind that then becomes your fact, your truth? And it might not be accurate, but and you always wonder, did somebody see me not take the sacrament? What are they thinking about me? That insecurity is so damning that it makes you want to just be like, well, then I'm not going to tell the bishop things that I did. I mean, that's literally crossed my mind. And actually through life, there's been a lot of things that I'm like, you know what? That's not the bishop's business. It's between me and God, not the bishop. And, believers will tell you that's not the way it works. If it's a serious enough sin, but then that threshold is not quite defined. So, let's see, I'm going to jump back to, the military. One of the things when I was looking to join the military was I was excited for the adventure to kind of see the world, if you will. And the other thing that I considered too is, in the military, especially if you're an airborne medic, you're going to be dropped into some pretty hot zones, some pretty hot places, and very dangerous. And one of the thoughts that crossed my mind is, very probably a higher likelihood that I'll be killed doing that than I might be if I was, doing some other job somewhere in the military. But that actually didn't deter me whatsoever. I actually looked at that and said, you know what, though? And now remember, at this time, I was back active in the church. And what I'd been learning every week was how worthless I was. Now, they don't come straight across and tell you how worthless you are. But I mean, that's kind of the undertone that, you're going and you're learning that if you've committed a sexual sin, which was something that I did according to the church, then I am just barely better than a person that murdered somebody. So I actually didn't care if I died. Now, I've never been suicidal, but at that point in my life, I didn't care if I died. I didn't care about my life. I didn't want to take it myself, but I was like, it's all right. I'm fairly worthless. So that's honestly how I felt. Kind of interesting. I didn't recognize that at the time, that it was the things that I was putting in my head that made me feel that way. But one of the things the bishop asked me to do was to gain a testimony of the Book of Mormon. So I read it cover to cover. At the end of the Book of Mormon, there's a segment that says, "Hey, when you read these things, pray about it, and the Holy Ghost," or I don't know exactly how it's worded. I don't have any scriptures here at the moment, but it basically says, "Pray about it, and you'll know for yourself that it's true." So I actually finished while I was on shift one day, and I went to the back of an ambulance to get some privacy as we were waiting for calls, and knelt on or next to a gurney and prayed about it, about the Book of Mormon and its truthfulness. And I remember distinctly the answer that I felt. It's almost like I heard a voice that says, "You already know." And it wasn't yes, it wasn't no, it was just, "You already know." And I never really knew what to do with that, but I kind of chalked it up to, well, I've been told it's true. I feel pretty good when I read it. And so it must be true. And that must be the "you already know." So I just said, okay, well, I now have a testimony of the Book of Mormon. Let's go. I was called to a mission in Brazil. It was the Brazil Belo Horizonte Oeste, which is the West Belo Horizonte, if you want to speak gringo. It's been 20 years since I've been home, and more than 20 years. And I tell you what, my Portuguese is awful, and I don't speak it much. So I apologize for any of you, especially Brazilians, that might watch this and judge me for my lack of Portuguese speaking. Experiences on the mission. I'll just go into a couple, but kind of give you a brief overview. My mission was actually overall a very good experience. The mission president and his wife, and he had 2 kids that lived with him at that time in the mission home. And I don't think that, I mean, I've heard a lot of stories about mission presidents, some good, some bad. I don't think that I could have asked for better mission president and wife and family. The mission president was a very inspiring man. He was scary because he was like very, just so spiritual and I don't know, just a great man, and absolutely love him. I absolutely love him. And his wife was, they become the mission president's wife to many becomes kind of a surrogate mom. And it's interesting with me not having a mother growing up. I don't know if that amplified the ability for me to take on a surrogate mom. I've had a few stepmoms through my growing up days, and so it was. Anyway, I really did look at her also as a mother figure, and she loved me, I feel like, as one of her kids. And so I couldn't have asked for better mission president and wife. And as far as companions go, there was only one that I didn't really get along with. I'm pretty easy to get along with people. There were a lot of things that different companions did that I was just like kind of annoyed with, but ultimately, I can get along with almost anybody as long as they're not being like harmful to others and showing a lot of hate to others. I can get along with pretty much anybody. But this one was really like we just fought about just really stupid, dumb things, and I was really happy. We were zone leaders, and so the more responsibility that you're given, the more impact your lack of relationship has on the mission. And so it was kind of sad to think back that like we were zone leaders and not getting along, and that possibly showed through to other missionaries in our zone and could have affected the work. I don't really know if it did or not, but certainly has that potential. But I was really happy when he got transferred. He got transferred to the office to be an assistant to the president. And, I thought, good for him. He's out of my hair. And then one transfer goes by, and then I get transferred to the office to be an assistant to the president, and I'm his companion again. And both of us were like, oh, okay, let's figure this out. And we talked through different things that bothered us about the other, and it was all just really stupid stuff. We ended up becoming really good friends, and I think it made us more effective in our work. And at that level in the mission, now you're out training zone leaders and district, like you're doing work that's impacting the whole mission, not just your zone or just district when you're a district leader. And anyway, a lot of responsibility there, but we figured it out and we did great. 9/11 hit while I was on my mission, and that was a really dark time for me because I already wanted to go to the military, and I guess you could say I already had made peace with the fact that I would die for my country. And then when 9/11 hit, I wanted to go home. It was pretty devastating to be out of the country when that happened, and have the mission president, I think, was trying to be understanding to everybody that wanted to go home, and just asked for us to give it some time and be really, thoughtful about what we wanted to do. And anyway, ended up staying there. One of the things on the mission, and you'll hear a term for people that leave the church, what broke your shelf? Throughout time, you have different experiences, and a lot of the stuff we just kind of put up on the shelf. We dismiss it. We're taught in the church to not focus on the negative things about the church. Sure, it's got some bad history, but you know what? We have the priesthood. We have the Book of Mormon. We have living prophets. We have the fullness of the gospel. And so, yeah, it wasn't always pretty in the early days, but look what we have. And you focus on that stuff to build your testimony. So then what do you do with the other things? You just kind of put them up on the shelf, and you just start kind of loading up that shelf. And some people's shelf never breaks. Some people's shelf, my shelf cracked at one point, and then broke later. And again, we'll go through that. But this is one of those things that, one of the things that was a shelf, something that I put up on my shelf. We went to lunch to a guy's house. I'm trying to think of the name of the city, and I can't quite remember it. But he was not. I don't know if he was a member of the church or just inactive. I know he didn't go to church, but we went there to his house, and when I was introduced to him, I shook his hand. And the way he shook my hand was, let me kind of back up a little bit. In the temple, I'm not going to go through in great detail the different ceremonies and different things that you do in the temple, because it is considered sacred to those who believe. And my goal here isn't to offend people, especially bringing out things that they consider very sacred to them. So I'm gonna kind of leave that alone for the most part. But one of the things, there's different things that you do and you might call them secret handshakes, and that's what I'll call them for lack of better description. And I'll talk in detail to people because I don't anymore believe that those things are sacred. But I won't just blast it out here at this point. That's not the purpose of this video. So you have these different handshakes. They mean different things, and they're attached to different promises and covenants that you make in the temple. Well, when I shook this guy's hand, he did this grip of a handshake that you do in the temple, and it freaked me out. And I pulled my hand back, and I'm like, "Dude, what was that?" And he just kind of laughed and said, "Well, I'm a Freemason." And I'm like, "Okay, not sure what that means, but okay." And so just kind of put that on my shelf, and I actually didn't quite make that connection completely and understand why that would be part of Freemasonry until last year when I learned some things. And I was just like, okay, whatever. At that time, I put it up on the shelf. This is what you do. You don't focus on these weird things. You focus on moving forward and building a testimony. In the temple, though, I'm gonna talk about that here for just a moment before I go back to the mission. So you are given a card. You basically go through this worthiness process and interview process, and you're given a card that's called a recommend, the temple recommend. And some of the questions that you're asked to get this recommend are, do you believe Joseph Smith was a true prophet? Do you believe that Joseph Smith restored the gospel, or that Jesus Christ restored the gospel through Joseph Smith? Do you believe that such and such, whoever's the president of the church and his counselors, do you believe that the first presidency are prophets, seers, and revelators, that the apostles are prophets, seers, and revelators, so forth? You agree that different points of the church are true. Do you pay full tithing, meaning 10% of your income? Do you pay that? Are you honest in your dealings with your fellow man? All of that kind of stuff are things that they ask about in the temple recommend interviews. And so you go to the temple. The first time you go, you may have gone through some temple prep classes, which I did. At least I believe I did, but I didn't. I was not prepared for what happens in the temple. People throw out the word cult to describe the Mormon religion, and there's a lot of different groups that have been considered cults. And I always thought a cult was different than what I was experiencing. A cult, I always attached a lot of violence and death to a cult. Anyway, I never thought of the church as a cult, except for when I was in the temple the first time. There are different ceremonies and different things that you do where, you dress a certain way. The temple clothing was very strange to me. And then some of the ordinances that you do and different, I guess, things that you do and say in the temple were felt very, very cultish to me. And I remember just thinking, what the hell is going on here? But, when you go through, especially for the first time, if you have loved ones that have been through the temple, a lot of times they'll go to help support you. And they're just so proud of you. And I had my grandpa there, my uncle there, other loved ones there. And they were all very proud of me for getting to this point where I could go to the temple. And I'm like just super confused about what's happening. And I look over to them and they're smiling and I'm just like, okay. And this was another shelf item. I just thought, well, you know what, Jason, you're just spiritually immature, and you just got to keep coming back. Just push through these awkward feelings that you have, and just keep coming back. And pretty soon you'll learn to enjoy it. And never once through many years of temple, uh, attendance, did I ever feel really comfortable. I convinced myself that I was happy in the temple, and sure, there were many times where I felt a lot of peace in the temple, especially at the end of the temple session. You go into a room called the Celestial Room. It's a beautiful room, and it's very quiet. If you want to pray, read scripture, something like that, yeah, there's plenty of times that I felt peace in there, but never, ever, not once did I ever not feel awkward going through the different things that you go through in the temple session itself. And then one time before my mission, there was a temple dedication that was broadcast to my stake center, and so I went, and you had to have a temple recommend in order to watch the broadcast, which I had. And so I watched this broadcast, and there's one part of it called the Hosanna Shout, where you have a white handkerchief and you wave it over your head and shout Hosanna, Hosanna. I think Hosanna to God and the Lamb. I can't remember exactly what the shout is, but that was another moment where I was just like, this feels very cultish and I don't like it. That was an ordinance or an experience that there was no expectation that I ever did that again. Unlike the temple, it's an expectation that you go back time and time again. You're supposed to do that to help the dead that never got a chance to go through the temple. So I went through the temple a lot before my mission, after my mission. I went to the temple a lot because I believed that it was necessary, although very awkward, it was necessary to redeem the dead. That was one of the missions of the church at the time. So, but temple dedications, I never went to another one of those. I never cared to. It was not something I was interested in participating in again. So I didn't. So I don't know if they still do that thing. I'm sure they do, because I know there's a temple dedication coming up close to me, and I've seen people on Facebook selling white handkerchiefs for that dedication. So I'm guessing it's still a thing. All right, sorry about that little tangent there. I was just kind of glancing at my notes and noticed that I didn't go over some of the temple things that I wanted to touch on. Back to the mission. So, you've got the Freemason. That was super awkward. But again, I didn't know what to do with that experience. So I put it on my shelf and I just focused on other things. One of the things that I did experience a couple times, I didn't experience directly a lot of violence like some missionaries do. There were two times where a person had attempted to rob me and my companion. Both times they were unsuccessful. One of them, we dipped into a store there was a police officer standing out front. We told him what was going on. We went and hid in the store till the coast was clear, and then we ran home. The second one was we were coming home from our travels as assistants, and we got off the bus. It was after midnight, and as assistants, we were, I guess, okayed to do travel off hours. Missionaries are under very, very strict rules of curfew. And so we decided, I guess I for whatever reason, we were allowed to travel overnight because our job just required a lot of travel. And so, we got off the bus. A man came at us with a weapon and wanted to rob us, and we just ran and were able to get away from him. But the one thing, though, that I will mention is we were always extremely poor. And, you read the scriptures about how Christ had no money with him. A lot of the early missionaries of the church, they would make a point to leave with no purse or script, that they would just trust in the Lord to get them by. That's fine, I guess, and maybe that's why we were very poor. But you pay out of your own pocket like $10,000 to go on a mission, and then to be on a mission and not have any money available to you to buy things. And some might say, no, you're given an allowance. You are given an allowance, But let me tell you, the way that it worked was that that allowance, and I wasn't like just buying all this crap and wasting my money. That allowance didn't get you by. And so you had to rely on others to feed you. And if they were unavailable or unable to feed you, then you had to feed yourself and you have to have money to do that. There was a lot of times where we, went without breakfast because, and we walked miles and miles every day. So nutrition was important. You'd go without breakfast, hope that you get lunch, and then find out that your lunch appointment cancels. So now you're out 2 meals and you don't have money to buy food. So you start just showing up at church members' houses, hoping that they'll feed you something. And I hated that. And especially the fact that you finance your own mission. Now, I didn't have $10,000. I had a car that was sold. And then my family, many people in my family were pitching in to help pay for my mission. And so, but and then you ask for money. I asked for money from home. There wasn't a safe way to send it to Brazil. So you had to like hide it in stuff, in a package. And then very oftentimes your package was rummaged through and sometimes never showed up. So, when we would need a pair of shoes sent to us, we were given the instructions to ask for the shoes to come in separate packages that are not sent on the same day. So if somebody were to go through that package and see just one shoe, well, what are they going to do with one shoe? So they just let the package go to its location. But if you have a pair of shoes in a box, now all of a sudden, that's an item that someone can take and make use of. So yeah, it was interesting. And it just drives me crazy to know that missionaries might be out there starving. Now, stateside missionaries, it's very easy probably to get them a debit card and just wire money to that. That was not the case for me in Brazil. I did not have. Some of my mission companions had debit cards, and their family was loading them up with plenty of money, and that's, really how I got by. Sometimes was off of their dime. So that's a frustrating fact that you pay for your own mission and then have to suffer through not having money on your mission. There were some different decisions that we made in the mission to try to save money, and some of which compromised our own health, which we ended up, instead of buying purified water to drink, we would drink out of the tap and got very, very sick by doing that. And in fact, let me give a trigger warning here. If you're queasy, skip ahead probably 2-3 minutes. But one of the times we started drinking out of the tap so that we could have money to buy food. And there were 5 of us in this house, 2 bathrooms, and all 5 of us got deathly ill. This was November 2001. All of us got very, very ill, and all sorts of digestive, we're talking vomit, diarrhea, the works, and sometimes at the same time. It was just extremely violent sickness that we had. And I apologize for the graphic nature of this, but you'll see why here in just a moment. After that month, my companion and I were sent to another neighborhood to open up the work over there, and they kind of split us up a little bit from that house. And all of a sudden we started getting better, and later learned that there was a man who climbed up the water tower and fell in the water tower that fed that neighborhood. And he fell in and drowned, and nobody knew where he was. He was just missing. And so his body was decomposing in that water tower, or in that, that water basin that was feeding this neighborhood. And all of us missionaries were drinking that water, but everyone else in the neighborhood was bathing in that water. And it's just crazy. Anyway, so overall, though, I look back on my mission. My wife asked me not long ago, do you regret going on a mission? And that's a really tough question. I don't I believe that I grew. I believe that I became a different person. There were a lot of leadership positions that I held on the mission, so I would say that there was a lot of leadership growth that I made in the mission. And does that contribute to who I am today? I would say without a doubt it does. I've always wanted to go back to my mission to visit the people that I worked with. Now it's kind of I'm in a weird place because now, with the knowledge that I have and the facts that I believe, if I were to go back, I think I would want to go seek out those individuals that I got really close with and baptized and teach them what I've learned, and at least let them decide for themselves after knowing this stuff if they want to stay in or not. So it's kind of weird. If I was to go back to the mission, I would almost want to do the opposite work that I did while I was there. But also, I will say this: after the item that broke my shelf and Kimberly's shelf, or at least severely cracked it, at that point we were willing to accept new information. But it was so hard on our mental health to hear these things, to learn these things, that that's one reason I don't want to go back to Brazil and teach these things, because I don't want to put these people that I've loved in that situation. But then again, I guess that's exactly what I'm doing with this video. So I don't even know. I don't know. I don't necessarily regret it. My life has turned out just fine. There's different experiences that I've had that I would attribute to the mission, that, another language that I've learned. And then also that has enabled me, Portuguese had enabled me to learn a lot of Spanish. And so I wouldn't say that I'm trilingual. I wouldn't even actually call myself bilingual. I think I could go to Brazil and get by just fine. But when I try to speak it, it's kind of bad. So, gosh, I keep glancing over and I'm seeing this light is really harsh. So I guess I'm like an angel. After my mission, though, 2 months after I got home, I was engaged to my wife, and 6 months after I got home, I married my wife in the Salt Lake City temple. Now, that seems quick, but we did date before I left on my mission, and we wrote most of my mission. And I say most because she dumped me 3 times while I was on my mission. And she denies it, but I thought it was just 2, but I wrote in my journal every single day. And when I was reading my journal to my kids a few years back, I came across a third, they call it a Dear John letter, but I came across a journal entry talking about receiving a third Dear John letter. So she dumped me 3 times. I'll let that be on the record. I love my wife so much, and we've been married for over 20 years now, and she's my rock. I couldn't have asked for a better companion in this life. But yeah, we got married in the Salt Lake City temple, and it's interesting because at the time I knew that that's where I needed to get married, because we believe as Mormons that when you get married in the temple, you're sealed, or you're connected for time and all eternity, because the person that does your wedding holds the sealing power as part of the priesthood, which is like, just the power to mold on earth and have that molding stay molded up in heaven, I guess. I'm trying to explain that for somebody that's never heard of this sort of thing that might come across this video. But it's a sealing that's supposed to be effective in heaven as well. Now, the problem with getting married in the temple is that the only witnesses that can watch you get married in the temple are those that are considered worthy by the church to enter the temple. What did that mean? That meant that my dad and my older sister were not able to come watch my wedding. Now, I don't know what their life circumstances were at the time, where their belief was at the time, but I look back on that and say, okay, was my father or my sister doing anything that was so contrary to Christ's teachings that they wouldn't have been able to enter the temple? Would Christ have made them stay outside till the bride and groom come out? I mean, I don't think he would. What kept them from it? I don't know. I haven't asked them that question, and I don't really care, because at the time, my thought process was, shoot, I'm so sorry you're not eligible. You're not worthy to enter the temple. I am. I'm going to go get married in the temple, and it sucks that you can't be there. So straighten up your life, and you can too enter the temple. And that's kind of that was my way of thinking and judging as a worthy Mormon. And I'm going to put that in quotes, because that doesn't deserve to not be in quotes. I look back on that now and I think just how horrible that was, that my own dad and sister couldn't watch me get married. And that just blows my mind. And I'm so sorry that I chose to get married in the temple. Now, you can still get married in the temple. You can still get sealed in the temple, but you can also do like a civil marriage first. Like anyone else gets married on the beach, in the mountains, at a resort, at a reception center, church building, courthouse, whatever. You can still get married like everybody else and then go to the temple to get sealed. But that wasn't the practice. That was kind of frowned upon. It's like, nope, take care of the temple marriage, because that's the most important. So in essence, the most important thing is to leave the people that you love the most out of it if they're not worthy. And that they don't say that, but that's what happens. And so I'm sorry. I'm sorry to you, Dad, and my older sister. I'm going to try not to name names here, but if anybody is watching this that knows me, they know who they are. I have two other siblings, half siblings. They were both too young to go into the temple, even if they don't give temple recommends, up to a certain age. So they were both too young, but it's just, I don't know. It's kind of messed up. It's all about bringing families together, but it also can drive a wedge in the family. And it's just interesting how that works. Okay, so my wife and I spent the first several years of marriage fighting infertility. We were unable to have children, and others around us were just popping them out. We'd see people around us having kids, coworkers, family members. You get into a place where you're going, does God hate me? Because allegedly he's got all these spirit children in heaven that are waiting to come down, but I'm unworthy to have his children. So you can't help but question God's love for you when you're going through infertility as a religious person. So we ended up seeking help through LDS Family Services, and we adopted two boys through that service over two separate, they were born 8 months apart, but they're close enough in age and where their birthdays fall that they're actually in the same grade at school. And One of them is a Caucasian boy that was born here in Utah, and the other one is a biracial boy who was born in Ohio. And that's just kind of an interesting mix because Utah is not a very, very diverse place. And so my son, Alex, is like, there's just not a lot of people of color around in Utah. So um, just two wonderful boys. I think I put our thumbnail on our family our a picture of our family on as the thumbnail to this video. Um, I will say I've got some great looking kids, and where my wife is a very beautiful woman. Um, I like to think that I'm decent, but I'm like, if we would have had our own biological kids and they took too much after me, they may not be as good looking as the kids that I've got. So I am very grateful for the kids that I've got. Um, I want to mention here too that LDS Family Services, and I don't know this for a fact. I can only speak to the experience that we had. They did not prepare us for the trauma that exists in the adoption process. The trauma of somebody placing their child for adoption to strangers. Now, we did get a chance to meet them. They did pick us in our profile on the agency's website. They did pick us, and then we did get to know them. The birth mom in Ohio, we only got to know her over the phone. And the one in Utah, we were able to go out to dinner a couple times with them and get to know them. But the trauma that they go through when they place their child into your hands is something that is just, it's so hard and emotional. And it's weird because like Kimberly and I are so thankful that they've chosen us to parent their child and don't understand the loss that they're going through by placing their child. And we witnessed that trauma stay with some of these birth parents for so many years, and you can't blame it. You can't do anything about it. It's so devastating. We have open adoptions, and so we do see them from time to time, the birth parents, and they're just beautiful people and complete, like, they're our heroes, and we love them so much. But we also hate that they had to go through so much pain to become our heroes. And it just doesn't seem fair. Adoption is a beautiful thing and also a very traumatic thing. I'm thankful for it. It's the reason we have children. It's the reason we're parents. But it's just devastating. And from my perspective, and I might be completely wrong, but from my perspective, LDS Family Services failed with our adoption, especially in Ohio, to support those that needed support. It almost seemed like a business transaction, honestly, from my perspective. Now, I might be completely wrong, but from my perspective, looking back now, it feels like just a very harsh, basic business transaction. And I hate looking at it like that because there's so much love and pain that goes into that process. So I just want to take a moment and tell you, the birth mom of Alex and her family, her husband, thank you, and we love you. You are our rock. You are our hero. And the birth parents of Dawson, the same. You're all just so incredible. And I got to stop there because I'm going to try not to get emotional or too emotional. But you're just incredible people. And I'm so sorry that you had to hurt so much to make this all happen. It's not fair. It's really not fair. And I'll just end with that as far as adoption goes. Okay, let's move on. So as far as church goes, Kimberly and I, we're active in the church. We're married in the temple. We go to, we buy a home, our first home. We go to that ward, and at this time we're fighting with these fertility issues. This is before adoptions, and we're placed in the nursery. So in the church, you're given callings or jobs, and they try to do this to keep everybody engaged so that you don't fall away, so that you don't stop believing. So, and that might sound a little bit harsh to come to that conclusion. I know when I was on the mission, we were told, get these people callings so that they don't stop coming to church, so that they can continue to build their testimony. Callings are meant to give you a responsibility, a belonging in church, and to start the process of or continue the process of building your testimony and keeping you active in the church. So the first calling that we received, now I'll also mention that we are told that when we are called to a position by the bishop, that calling actually, even though it was the bishop or somebody in the bishopric, one of his counselors, that asked you if you would do that job, that calling actually didn't come from that man. That calling came from God through that man, through inspiration or prophecy, or not prophecy, but revelation, that leader of your ward is eligible to receive for the people of that ward. So we're called to be in the nursery while fighting with infertility. I know 100%. I shouldn't say I know, because that's going to be something that I will call people out if they say they know something about the church. Unless it's a fact, they don't know it, they believe it. So I believe that calling did not come from God. That was, we need a body in the nursery, which takes care of kids starting at, I believe it's 18 months, to watch over those kids and play games with those kids and eat snacks with those kids, which, by the way, was the benefit of being in the nursery. Sing songs, play games, eat snacks with those kids while their parents could be attending their church services. So that was the job. But at the time, my wife, especially, she can, I love her to death. She can be emotional sometimes. I tease her because, and that's harsh, I know, but if she goes to the doctor's office because her knee hurts, when she's describing the fact that her knee hurts, like that alone could make her cry. So I love her so much, but she does have, she wears her emotions right on the surface, basically. But I shouldn't just discount this, because you don't necessarily have to wear your emotions that close to the surface when you can't have babies and you believe that God might not love you so much, and that's why you can't have babies. And then your job in the church is to take care of other people's babies. That just doesn't add up. And that's why I don't believe that calling ever came from God. I served, just to kind of go through a resume of sorts, of church service. I served in the young men's. I served as a physical facilities rep, which is the person that's in charge of getting people to volunteer to clean the church weekly. And that position just was crazy, drove me crazy. primary. I was in the primary where you teach young kids that are old enough to graduate, to not be in the nursery, but not 12 years old yet, where they would enter either young men's or young women's. So I was in the primary for a while, for quite a while actually. I was a gospel doctrine teacher and elders quorum instructor. And then one of the callings that I had early on in our first ward, so within the first 10 years of marriage, is when we lived in this area. I was called into the bishop's office, and the bishop said, "Hey, Brother Bailey, what's your experience with the scouting program?" And the Boy Scouts of America, for those that don't know, for many years, up until 2001-ish, the church was one of the, if not the biggest sponsor of the Boy Scouts of America program, and so is so tightly connected to the Mormon Church that on activity days where you would normally go spend time with the other young men or young women or whatever, you would actually do scouts. And because I wasn't very active through my growing up days, I never really got into scouts, and I didn't care about scouts. In scouting, you learn a lot of really great skills. You learn a lot of outdoor skills. There are different merit badges that you can earn, sewing merit badges. There's fire making merit badges. There's pilot merit badges. There's merit badges for so many things. And there are different requirements to achieve different ranks within the scouting program to eventually lead up to an Eagle Scout. A lot of parents who are big into scouting might require their son to achieve his Eagle Scout before he can get his driver's license. And I don't want to mock that. That's your thing. That's where your values, what you find most important. That's fine. I hated scouts. I never was interested in scouts. I know a lot of outdoor skills. I spent a lot of time outdoors with my dad and my mom and family. I go out in my backyard and teach my kids how to make different fires. And, I was never a fan of scouts. And even most recently, with all the sex abuse scandals that go on in the scouting program, I'm not saying it's all bad, but there's enough bad that I have never supported my children to be in the scouting program either. But so anyway, I'm in the bishop's office. He asks me what my experience is with the scouting program. And I just said, "You know what, Bishop, not interested." I knew where the conversation was going. As soon as he asked that question, I know that he's about to give me a job in the scouting program. And I was just like, I don't like scouts. I don't foresee myself liking scouts. I don't support it. It's not part of who I am. And he goes, "All right, well, I think you'll do a fine job. I think you'll do good." So he calls me to be a varsity coach, which is one of the leaders of the local troop. And it didn't last too long because it wasn't long after trying to fake it. It was one of those fake it till you make it things. And I could only fake it so long till I went back to the bishop and I just said, scouting is a very serious thing to a lot of these kids and their parents. And I'm doing them a disservice by trying to pretend that I like scouts, that I support them, and that I care at all about their progression in the scouting program that I need out. This is not my job. This is not the job for me. I'm doing a disservice to them and their parents. So, I was released from that calling very, very soon after that conversation, but it was just interesting that is another calling that I am 100% convinced did not come from God. That was a need they needed a body to fill that space. And they knew I was an outdoorsy person, and just figured, hey, Jason can be a varsity coach. He must be an Eagle Scout if he's able to go out camping and make fires and such. It's anyway. So that was kind of a little bit of history of church service. A couple items there that just go up on the shelf as different things that have created some doubt in the way the church proclaims that it gets callings, that hands down callings. So I am going to stop here. Actually, I'm going to stop here. I'm going to pick up the next session in talking about like what I do for a living, and then start getting into applying some of those skills, that background from what I've shared thus far, and then from my career. I'm a fraud investigator by profession, and some of that, I've got a couple interesting stories that I'll share at a very high level from work. Nothing super earth shattering, well, kind of, but then I apply some of that knowledge that I've gained from work as I've evaluated some things with the church. And being a fraud investigator, teaser alert, we're gonna uncover some fraud or deception. So thanks you if you've stuck with me for an hour and a half. Thank you, and we will be back soon.